Mr. Spencer has always been a hoarder for as long as he remembered. He loved antiques more than anything else in the world. Vintage books, watches, coins, busts, cabinets and dressers. He was also a fan of oil paintings and human portraits in particular. With each day he owned more and more of that stuff. On yet another walk, he decided to drop by the local flea market as usual. Walking along the noisy roads and not finding anything interesting, he was ready to return home. But a lonely salesman caught his interest. More precisely, it was what this man was selling. A portrait. A female portrait. She was drawn very vividly and realistically, as if a living woman was looking at him from behind the frame. She looked a little over 25 years old. A big forehead, a heavy look, and unusually lively eyes that seemed to be looking at you. Straight dark hair went down beyond the frame of the painting. There was something in this portrait that attracted him, and he was ready to pay any price for it. It was a little creepy and even scary, and clearly did not claim to be of antique value, but still, somehow, it caught the eye. Without noticing it, Mr. Spencer was already standing next to this man and holding this portrait in his hands. The man gave the portrait and did not ask for money. He just nodded in gratitude, looked back at the portrait in a strange way and left it quickly. Mr. Spencer stood with the portrait in his hands in the noisy flea market, and then, apparently, when he realized that he had received the portrait for free, he was pleased to go home. The portrait looked good only in the bedroom. Besides, there was almost no space on the walls anywhere else. Already at night, before going to bed, Mr. Spencer felt someone's eyes on him. At half lights, the frame of the picture was not visible, and he mistook the portrait for a person standing next to the wall. There was something alive in that painting. Moreover, the hands' positions seemed to have changed. Wait a minute, what hands? There were no hands in the picture. Or did I forget? Well, I guess I'm just exhausted, thought Mr. Spencer, laying down, and then fell asleep. The next day the portrait was still hanging on the wall, and the experienced collector could not remember whether there had been hands before or not. Well, of course there have been hands before. They could not have appeared later, the old collector thought again. In the evening, Mr. Spencer was going to bed. He walked past the portrait as usual, and suddenly he noticed that the eyes of the portrait seemed to be watching him. They were clearly following him, moving from side to side. Mr. Spencer tumbled for a long time and could not fall asleep, thinking about how it was possible and whether it was his imagination. Then he took sedatives and fell asleep. The next night, the portrait was still looking at him without taking her eyes off. Mr. Spencer began to think he was going crazy. When he decided to go to bed, he looked at the portrait again. The horror changed his body. His breathing ceased, and his heart was ready to jump out of his chest. It wasn't the girl who was looking at him from the portrait anymore, but a terrible smiling face. He decided to get up and cover it with cloth, or put it on the floor, and in the morning he would put it in the storeroom so it could not scare him again like that. He was just about to get up when he saw the portrait move. The woman's hands, which were now folded on the chest, straightened up and creeped out of the picture. Fear chained him up. It was so terrible and crazy that he could not get up from his bed. The hands were still reaching for him. They reached out so far that they were already getting at his ankles. They stretched across the entire room, right to his feet. The skinny hands grabbed him by the legs. He was scared to death, felt burning pain and fainted. And the hands dragged him into the picture, and the old collector disappeared in the darkness of the terrifying portrait.